Hi, everybody who's joining us live and to people who's joining us later through recordings. And I am really tickled to be doing this interview with Christine. We used to be on a Zoom call a lot when we were editing The Secret of Love. And happen to have a copy here, gee. And, but, without having that to do, every so often we get on the phone, but I haven't actually. There are some questions I'm going to be asking Chris that in all the years I've known her, we're talking since 1985, when we were both small children back then. and so
you were 14.
Right? I actually have some questions that all these years never came out. And I know that you, Chris, you're on a lot of other webinars. I don't know that these questions were ever asked specifically. And at the end, everybody who's joining us live has an opportunity to ask Chris any question you want. There's no question that is, I'm setting you up for this, but there's got to be some limit, right?
Yeah.
So, Chris has so many things going on that, how they say, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person. So who do you think the first person was I asked to put these stories of couples who have had transformations? Was Chris. And I was just thrilled that she was able, she had enough time back then, but that's probably why it took us 5 years to write the book. But anyway, it's done, it's written, and the stories are just amazing. And so, aside from having the LMFT after her name, which is Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, she has a bunch of other letters after her name, which includes Master Addiction Counselor, I can't even remember what
certified substance abuse.
Certified substance abuse. That's yeah. And she's the executive director of the Hawaii Education and Consulting Center. Hawaii Center for
Counseling and Education Center.
HCEC. And Chris came from Minnesota. So what brought Chris from Minnesota to Hawaii? I'm wondering, if there's a connection, those of you who are on here from Mystery School, with the first book that Sid wrote, which was, I usually have that. Oh, I do have that book right here. Second Chance, which takes place in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. So I don't actually know the answer to that. And Chris, it's just been amazing to me what you have been able to accomplish. To be out in Hawaii as a complete newcomer in, I think it was around 1986 or so, and build. They are not only in one location, they are in several locations in multiple islands, I think. I mean, it's just beyond my ability to comprehend. And she and her group at this Hawaii Counseling and Education Center have then created programs for every aspect of society, parenting and children, and even sex offenders, I think. It's just remarkable to me when you get a group of like-minded people together, how they can create something that is just, wonderful. There's no word for it. And Chris also is doing a podcast, which I'll let her talk about that too. So enough of me. That's my first question for you, Chris. What brought you to Hawaii? And also, I think you're going to tie in with that. What brought you to Sid Banks? That's the first question.
The first question. Okay. Well, the first question, I'll go back a little bit. I was a therapist and I was really burned out. And I was in the same building with Joe Bailey. And so one day he came back from a trip to Florida. And honestly, we didn't like each other. Like we never talked. We never had anything to do with each other. I was an avid feminist therapist, and he was a male psychologist. So the two didn't really, go together very well. And but one day I came home, I came to the office, and he was leaving to go to lunch. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to lunch. You want to go?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I go to lunch with him, which was odd. And he starts talking to me about this training that he went to down in Florida, where he met a man by the name of Sidney Banks. But very quickly and he also met a really wonderful woman. And so long story short, this woman was Michael, his wife. And this is where he met her. And he just came back, and he was, fallen in love, and he was just higher than a kite. He was just in a really beautiful feeling. And so he's talking to me about this. And I really don't care that he met this guy named Sidney Banks. I was like, who's that? But I was interested in the fact that he found somebody that he was interested in. So a couple of other things happened. I had a roommate who his parents had both been survivors of the Holocaust, and his dad had a heart attack, and his mother went upstairs and killed herself on the same day. So he had all this trauma in his background, and he was struggling to deal with life. He was smoking a lot of marijuana, and he was a dialysis tech. So he got in trouble, with doing something at the dialysis unit. So I had sent him and his girlfriend to see another colleague of mine, and she sent him to Joe to start to get some individual help. Well, so he would be going to this group, and Joe was just starting to do the principles then. So he'd come back, and I'd say to him, I said, "Well, have you dealt with this yet?" And he goes, "No, but I feel better." I said, "Well, have you dealt with this yet?" He goes, "No, but I feel better." So now I'm like upset that my roommate is not getting good counseling, right? So I marched down to Joe's office to confront him about what he's doing with this in his therapy. Now, my best friend's husband was also in that group. And she's telling me, "Chris, I think you should check into this. There's something here." And I'm like poo-pooing it. So I go into this and say, "Okay, what is it you're doing?" So he starts talking to me, right? And I said, "Oh, it sounds like AA." "Well, it sounds like rational motive therapy." And so Joe gets upset with me. He's like had it with me because I'm not listening. And he says, "If you want to know, go to this training I'm having." So I went up to my office, and I thought to myself, well, he met this woman at a training, and maybe I should go to psychology trainings to meet a man rather than bars, because I keep finding alcoholics in bars. I don't know how that works, but I just thought that would be like, oh, that's a good idea. So I signed up for both days, because I thought if I met somebody the first day, the second day was optional. But if I met somebody the first day and I hadn't signed up for the second day, it would look too obvious. So I signed up for both days, and it turns out I was the first person to sign up for both days. And I go to the training, and long story short, that's a whole nother story, but I got blasted between the eyes. I mean, I had such a deep shift in me that it felt to me like life was changing me, and that this would be my work for the rest of my life. And I knew that. I could feel it happening. Like it was this 1,000 volts of electricity going through my body. And I was like, oh, I am being changed, and this is going to be my work. Okay. So after that weekend, Joe had one tape, the seminar in mental health that Sidney Banks had. In those days, there were no books, there were no tapes, there was no nothing. So this one little tape called Seminar in Mental Health. And I started listening to that every day, because every day something changed in my life. It was kind of like someone had taken over my body, and a new person walked in my life. And everybody that encountered me had a different experience, because the feeling I was in was so different. And people would come up to me and tell me how afraid they were of me, because I was such a badass. And, people thought I had joined the Moonies, which is a Sun Yen Moon cult, right? Or I was on drugs, or I met a man. Those are the three options that people could come up with because they'd never seen anybody really change that much by doing nothing, right? And so, long story short, we were both working in the same building, right, for our offices. And then people would refer people to us because they heard we were doing something new and good, but they'd go to my clinic that I had, and then anybody would get them. And I felt like that wasn't like being genuine to what we were learning. So Joe and I decided we'd set up a clinic of our own just based on the principles. So we set up the Minneapolis Institute of Mental Health. And then I ran that with him for 2 years. And one day we had this a social worker, a student, a graduate student, and she was, in my mind, a little bit nutty. And so I was talking to her, and evidently I came across in a way that was way too harsh and way too hard on her. And so Joe takes me aside and he says, Chris, you know, you're too hard on people. You got to loosen up. You can't be so hard on people. So I was so upset about this. I cried for 3 days. I just like, oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world, blah, 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 blah. And so on Sunday, I called Sydney Banks, and I'm crying all over again. I shouldn't be the director of this clinic. I'm negative. I'm hard on people. And he goes, now, Chris, he said, sometimes we get in a low mood, and sometimes we get in a very low mood like you are right now. He said, now, if there's something that you can see in yourself that you want to change it and forget it. But I think you're bored. Why don't you move to Hawaii and set up a clinic? And I was like, what a great idea. So I immediately had a shift in a feeling, right? It's much better than beating myself up for being an idiot. And so I started to then plan to how I was going to do this. Now, I'm from Minnesota. Minnesotans almost never move from Minnesota unless they go to Arizona when they're old, you know, or Florida when they're old. But by and large, they, you know, the idea of going on vacation in Minnesota is going to your cabin in northern Minnesota. And the idea of me moving to Hawaii was a huge thought. And my family was like, you're what? You're going where? And people had bets that I wouldn't make it. I'd come back. And so I talked to two of the nurses from the Advanced Human Studies Institute in Florida, Sue Sikora and Karen Miller, and another therapist that worked with me in Minnesota, Thea West, and they were all game to go. So I sold my house and I sold the business to Joe, and I packed up and moved to Hawaii without knowing a soul or realizing that it was really a different country. It wasn't really a part of the United States. And I got a very rude awakening because I was kind of the mind of like, oh, this will do its own work. I don't have to do anything. I'll just set up shop and it'll work. Well, that's not what happened at all. It was such a different culture and such a different place that I ended up having to get a job working as a therapist with another organization. And we were so poor for many years, just trying to make a go of it because there was very little counseling with master's level people in Hawaii. There was very little counseling, period. But the only people that got insurance reimbursement were PhDs at the time. So we were trying to figure out how to make it work. And what happened is we sent out a brochure talking about our philosophy. And one of the people at one of the health centers saw it and realized it was similar to the cultural things that she was learning about and how the Hawaiians were looking at living in aloha as mental well-being. And she said, you guys should apply for this grant. So we applied for the grant and got it. And then we applied for another grant. And then over the years, we grew the clinic up to about 65 employees at one time. And then they decided to make us do therapy the way they wanted it done. And so I said no, and we scaled it back down again after that. And so that was in 1985, I moved there. And Sid didn't write Second Chance until after that, but he moved there after I moved there. He moved to Maui and lived there while I was living there in the 80s.
Wow, there's a lot of that I hadn't heard before.
Mm.
So is it, I mean, to me, it sounds like a mystery and also a miracle that it occurred to you or it occurred to somebody to come up with this brochure and explain that your approach is all about innate health, that people are innately healthy. It's bringing out the health in people rather than trying to change someone. People automatically change when they're living from their health. And somebody in Hawaii read that brochure and said, this is exactly what our culture is about. The aloha spirit is about living from within, and how all of that came together and connected.
Mhm.
It's such a great story.
Mhm.
And I know that, how long was Sid living there when you were there? I know that he helped you, he consulted for you, and
Yeah, he lived there until the early 90s because he was at my wedding and I got married in 90. So I think he moved back after that. I think there's a number of years that you can live as a foreign national in the United States, and he lived up to that point and then had to go back to Canada.
wow. And Chris, you know, I never asked you this, which was how, like when you heard about Sid's experience, he had, you know, in the description of, it's on the Long Beach lectures called The Experience.
Mhm.
And what did you hear when you heard that? Because, you know, I'm not going to tell you what I heard, but I want to know what you heard.
Well, I haven't thought about that for a long time. So, I mean, I guess what I heard was that he was changed. It was like, for me, it was similar to, like I had had an experience like that, but it was obviously much more powerful than the experience I had, right? Because he was in a much different place, but I had an experience of being changed from within. So to me, I was like, that made total sense. I was in awe, really, of what had happened to him, that he'd just dropped into such a deep state of consciousness that he saw something and then was able to come back with it, that he was able to see that and then bring it back and share it in real time with the rest of us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really true that until I had, and it was fairly early on, I would say, I think it was actually the first talk that I attended of Sid's. And I was there not expecting anything great to happen, even though I had heard stories from other people. This has really been incredible for this person and that person. And people are even, you know, stopping drinking when they've been in numerous treatment centers, and all kinds of stories like that I heard. But it seemed so dramatic to me that I had my walls up, you know, like I just was a naysayer. I really, you know, I think, you know, in the very beginning, I just couldn't put it together in my mind, even though I was changing myself. Wasn't as dramatic as your change. It wasn't, you know, although maybe in a way it was, now that I think about it. You described it like feeling like 1,000 bolts of lightning. But my first lecture of Sid's, I had like a faucet turn on and tears running down my face, like, what is this? It wasn't the feeling of sadness. And later I realized it was such a relief that something in what Sid said, I guess I heard that we have this amazing power that we're part of. And it's the power that gives us the ability to think. Mm-hmm. And what we think is up to each one of us individually. We don't have to accept everything we make up with this power. I couldn't even spit out that amount of words, but I knew that I felt relief. That was the the faucet being turned on, this enormous relief that it's not up to me to create the world and the life I want to live. Life happens, like Sid said, that life is a contact sport. Life happens, but how we think about it is where we have free will. We have the choice. And, I would assume it happens to you too, Chris, that I still get triggered by things, but man, it doesn't last long. Something that would have triggered me for months, honestly, maybe a year, happens now. And it's, I get angry or sad or whatever as a result of what I'm thinking about what just happened. But then I come to my senses pretty quickly, like, well, that's an interesting place you just brought yourself in your head. It stays right. You don't have to keep thinking about that.
Yeah, it's the gift that keeps on giving, that's for sure. That's the deal with the principles, is that your understanding just keeps expanding. It's like the universe, it just keeps expanding into the nothingness, and it just is. There's always so much to see and to see differently.
Wow, I love that. The universe is always expanding, and so is our own understanding. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's a really
even Sid, if you listen to his early tapes and his later tapes, he got much more concise. That's one of the things, like people get these old pirated tapes and they're putting them up, and he expressly asked not to do that, because he realized that when he was talking, he had a lot of his own personal background in there. Like he would talk about the religion, and he'd kind of bring it out through his religion, and he realized that would get in the way, so he didn't want people to share that. So now the newer tapes are all shorter and more succinct, if you will, much more powerful. So you can even see that his understanding grew, and he got more grounded in what he was talking about. It came through more clearly through the years.
Oh, right. In fact, you reminded me that when Dr. D'Alessandre in West Virginia Medical School brought Sid in to speak to incoming interns and physicians, and named this research unit the Sydney Banks Institute of Innate Health. And there were initials for it, SB, whatever the initials are, the Sydney Banks Institute of Innate Health. And Sid said, no, it's not about me. Mm-hmm. So he was always so humble, and would even say, how could something like this happen to someone with a 9th grade education? Mm-hmm. He just couldn't believe it himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing to keep remembering, is the amazement of it, the amazement of how any of us have heard anything. Because when anybody gets a shift, it's the same shift, right? And so you can talk to somebody, and it's like one of his tapes, he goes, oh, you too? Oh, you too? Because you know that you're connecting at a place that's deeper, and everybody is the same there. And that's the beautiful part of it, is that it doesn't matter who you are or what you've done or what you know or what you don't know. It's the same for everybody.
Yeah, that's so true. Like people in all walks of life. And it doesn't mean that some people don't come and they say, well, this is hogwash, and then they leave, but then sometimes they come back years later and say, wait a minute. Like, do you know anybody that in particular that you can think of, Chris, who actually I sort of did, in the beginning, I thought I went to X number of talks of SIDS, and I don't remember what year it was, but I had this idea, well, I know everything there is. He said it himself. He says the same thing all the time. And so I was gone for a few years. And, just through grace, I could tell you, Hazel Banks said, you ought to check out, you think you know everything, but there's more to see. And that led to a training with George Pransky, and that led to coming back to flying to wherever Sid was speaking, because I realized this thing keeps going. It's the gift that keeps giving. It's such a great way to say it.
Yeah, the thing about it is, I think I know lots of people that have gone away from it, and you can see it even within our community. There are people that get involved with this new thing that, the non-duality thing and all that kind of stuff, where people go away from it and make it complicated because they get in their head and they want to own it. They want to make it be about what they know rather than what we all know. So I think that happens all the time. It happens. People lose their insight, and sometimes they just haven't had a deep enough shift, right, yet that they really see that they're out of their head. But anybody can get caught up in their thinking at any time. We're all very vulnerable to our own ego, our own thinking. It's an opportunity to learn how to change gracefully every day, I think.
Isn't that true? Yeah.
One of the things about the principles that I think is really interesting is some people that we've had been friends with forever. You know them, one of our colleagues, his wife had a stroke. And I didn't know this. I was calling him about another friend of ours' funeral that's coming up that we're having. And so I said, how are you doing? Oh, I'm okay. Well, how's your wife? Oh, she's not doing so good. She had a stroke. And I was like, what? And then he talked about how knowing the principles has helped him in the last week to get through this, right? To not be as stressed and as negative as he had been in the past.
Yeah.
Before he said, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't learned the principles, because I'd be lost with her, sick like this. I'm just would have been lost, but it is what it is. And I just got to deal with what's happening, and it's not fun, but we're getting through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really, to me, sometimes people kind of go to sleep. Like I have another a woman that learned about the principles in a prison program, and she had a drug problem and she had all kinds of mental health problems. She was on one of our conferences talking, and she'd been really doing really, really well. And she got out of prison. She got her sentence commuted. And then her daughter was murdered or died. And she totally lost it. She got really caught up in, her grief and her anger and everything that had happened with the daughter. And she was going to be my client for the 3PGC apprentice program. And she disappeared. She ghosted me. So we had to get somebody else at the last minute. So she was like gone, like she was really out there. And then, but she said she just recently asked for help, and she came back and she said, knowing the principles saved me through that. She said, I might have killed myself during that time had I not known the principles. She said, I was out there. She said, I did a lot of crazy things. I got to clean it up now. But she said, knowing the principles has helped me so much to keep my balance and to come back to what I know. So I think that also happens with people as they, our life gets better and things get easy and we kind of forget about it. Like, it's like, oh, I'm not suffering anymore. And we get back to our old thinking. And then something comes along and, hits you upside the head and you're like, oh, okay, I got to get focused here again. And it's like, it just, because we know it, because it's built into us, it just comes back to life. That's, I
Yeah.
think, that the beautiful thing. It's like really when you need it, it comes back to life.
Yeah, resiliency is the time to bounce back is shortened with this understanding. That's what I've witnessed in myself and in clients.
Mhm.
And Tom had his hand up. Yeah, there you are, Tom.
Hey. Well, thanks for doing this, Lori. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing great. I love your story. It really touched me. There's something about, do you ever feel like you've won the lottery?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
totally.
It's like, I feel that way. And all the synchronicities that, I actually first heard about Sydney Banks in the 1990s. I was living in Minnesota.
Oh,
And I don't know if you remember, there was a magazine called The Utney Reader.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And
I remember the article. Mhm.
the article. And that really, the story about Sid really touched me, but that was pre-Google.
Yeah.
And I had no clue, or it didn't occur to me that there were people I could have, that story just really touched me. And I remembered it over the years.
Mhm.
And then I moved out to Oregon. And for a while, I was really deeply into, my search had led me to the non-duality world,
Mhm.
which to me, in my experience of that world, it just felt like I was in this endless revolving door that didn't. Anyway, it just, but because of that, there was this non-dual teacher who I was on her email list, and she wrote an email about Amy Johnson.
Mm.
So I look up this person, Amy Johnson, and I'm kind of connecting with her. I Google her, and then I see the name Sid Banks in Principles. I said, that's that guy from 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And that just opened the whole world up of you and Dickin and 3PG. And coincidentally, I guess, at the same time, I had, in my adult life, I had been prone to long periods of very deep depression. And at that same time, I was just entering into like the worst 3 months of my life. But yet all you people were there via the magic of the webinars.
Mhm.
And that's what really saved me. And then when the light bulb went off for me, I'm just so, like, I feel like I won the lottery. Like, I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
And so I so appreciate Sid. And I also appreciate those of you who really carried the message and whatever, put it into a form that got to people like me.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so I just so appreciate that. But the synchronicities in the stories, like, wow, so lucky.
I know, it's, and that, I mean, for me anyway, I knew I had nothing to do with it. I mean, I'd probably have killed myself by now. I was so depressed and hopeless
Yeah.
because I tried everything there was. I was doing everything there was, and I was miserable. And so that kind of, it is kind of interesting because it was my roommate was being touched by it. My best friend's husband was being touched by it. And I could feel it was like, I always think of it like the Princess and the Pea. It was just like nudging me from the inside, but I didn't know it. Right. And so it's funny how that happens. That you get even a little glimmer of it, and somehow it expands, right? It comes into your life in a way, and it finds you.
Yeah. It's just so amazing. And sometimes, like, I'll just be sitting and I'll think, wow, something's so grateful. Something's really changed. And then I can't even put it in the words, well, what has changed? I mean, I could try, like, if you ask me what changed, but you know what I'm saying? There's just this feeling when you said something about aloha spirit, like, I've heard that word before, but that really hit me because it is kind of like, you really can't say what it is. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That the Hawaiians actually identified innate mental well-being before anybody else. I have not heard of another culture that has been that. I mean, every culture talks about innate health in some way, but they really recognize the power of that. And they would talk about it as being within everyone. Like, it's even within the Howleys that are here. It's like, it's like everyone has it. And then it's about not only the spirit of aloha, but it's living from the spirit.
Yeah.
So aloha, frequently people think it means hello or goodbye or love, but it really is, I'm sharing my aloha with you. I'm sharing this beautiful feeling with you. And I'm coming from aloha. I'm coming from a place of love with you. So it's, I was amazed when I first came here for a conference before I moved here. And I saw all of the reference to aloha, and I was like paying attention to what it meant. And I was like, when Sid said to me, why don't you move to Hawaii and set up a clinic? I thought, oh, perfect. That would be a perfect place because they already know about this,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to going to New York City, where it would have been a really uphill battle, right? So it made a lot of sense to me with that. But that's, I mean, to me, I mean, I was drawn to Hawaii. I came into Hawaii in July, and I met my husband in September.
Mhm.
And I didn't even date another man after I moved here. I met him. I didn't even, my first date with him, I didn't even know was a date. He wasn't my type. There was nothing about him that was the least bit interesting to me, except that he had this beautiful feeling. So I feel like I had to get moved across my wish was to find somebody to spend the rest of my life with, and that wanted to live in that feeling. And so I got moved across the world so that I could find him.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's that, you know, those little things that happen, that's the magic. That's why Lori and I wrote our book, The Secret of Love, unlock the mystery, but also unleash the magic. Because when you touch that part of you and you unleash it, that's when things happen in your life you can't explain.
Right.
Like I can't explain what happened to me. Really, I had an insight. I just turned around. I thought, oh my God, I'm looking at life backwards. No wonder I can't do it very well. And it was hilarious to me. I thought I'm doing everything backwards. And that then became the impetus for the podcast that Judy and I are doing called Psychology Has It Backwards. So that insight's still coming forth, right? Still, like it took me 40 years to actually come out and say that after that was my first insight.
Oh, man.
So, you know, it's amazing to me how much I miss too. You know, like I could have done that right away, but no, I have to wait 40 years to do it. So yeah, it's that gratitude is the key to it, isn't it? It's like you realize that it is a special thing.
Yeah. I mean, you know it's there when it occurs to you, you know it's there no matter what's happening. No
Yeah.
matter what you think about is going on in your life, it's there.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Tom.
I don't know that a day goes by that I don't think in my mind, I don't thank my ex-husband for introducing me to Sid, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny that the guides we get in life guiding us in the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Come in very strange forms.
Yeah. What a difference. I would not be a therapist today. Yeah. Right? What would we be doing today if there wasn't
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was going to get out of the field actually. That when I went to the conference, I was going to get out of the field because I thought it was a bunch of crap. You know, I thought, you know, my clients get a little better, but they're not happy and I'm not happy and none of my colleagues are happy. So why do I want to do this for the rest of my life? I don't think so.
We've got 2 more hands raised. How about Anna? You want to unmute and ask?
Hi, Anna.
Hi guys. Hi, Christine. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. My question. My question has to do with something that I read on Judy Sedgman's Keeping It Pure letter after Sid's last talk. And she says something about working through the feeling to lead others.
Mhm.
And I'm really curious about that. I am hosting on Heartfelt Presence.
Mhm.
And there is people that have never been in touch with the principles and some people that have been recurring visitors to the room. And I just wonder, yeah, what's within that? What, if there is anything that can be explained? I think working through the feeling is just working through the feeling. But if you find something that could be useful in that regard, I'm really interested in that aspect, because I, yeah, I really want to kind of take everything that isn't necessary that I sometimes have a tendency to add, and just keep it really simple and really powerful, I guess, and just, you know, working through the feeling. What would that mean? You know, I know that when I say mean, it's like I'm trying to use my intellect to figure it out, but I'm sure there is something that you can see. I don't know if this question makes sense, by the way.
I think it's a wonderful question, but the answer isn't intellectual. As your insight goes deeper and you talk from a space of knowing, that's the feeling he's talking about. So sometimes people mistake that feeling for just being in a good feeling. They're like, oh, just being happy. But it's actually deeper than that. It's like when you're connected up with the energy that creates you, that is you, and you speak from that feeling without your little intellect being the middleman, then what comes through you is an experience. And that feeling is what he's talking about. So if you listen to his tapes and you listen not to his words, but you just listen to the state of mind he's talking from, the feeling that he's talking about, that's what he's talking about. And each time your understanding goes deeper, the feeling that comes through you is more powerful. But for me, I had to learn how to talk from the feeling and not try to edit it with my own little pea brain, because that then dilutes it. So then it becomes just the words. So when you're talking with someone, if you're really just present with them and you have your own understanding of the principles, you just talk from that feeling. That's going to be better than they're in anyway. And that's, you know, it's like, as long as your feeling is better than the person you're talking to, you're good. That's all you need to worry about.
Like that. Like
yeah. Yeah. So you don't have to come in at a level of Sydney Banks. You just have to be above the person you're talking to, because they'll wake up on their own to their own feeling. But like, I can tell the difference. I can be talking to somebody, and when I'm talking from that really deeper feeling, I can feel it coming through me. And then sometimes I'm not talking from that deep, but it's still a pretty good feeling. Right. But there's something that happens when we're intentional about coming from the energy that creates us. Like letting it, in my mind, it's like you let it flow through you, and it comes through and it touches the other person, and then they wake up. It's kind of like when you touch somebody on the shoulder, you know, that, oh, here. Well, it's kind of like when you talk to them from that feeling, you touch them, and then they wake up to it, and they get a shift, and then they get a feeling. And that's it. That's why it's so important that we talk about coming from the feeling, because the words don't mean anything. I mean, I've heard people talk about the principles in ways that are very intellectual. Like there's not a feeling behind it, and it doesn't go anywhere. So like one of the things for me is like, I know if I'm talking and I think I'm talking pretty high or whatever, and like nothing happens, like me, you know, because when it's not me talking, when it's the feeling coming through me, then I don't have to do anything. I don't have to worry about it. It's not my business, really.
But what has been a challenge for me, or an opportunity for that matter, is that I feel I can get to a deep place within myself, but that requires me to really slow down
Yes, it does.
and really hold the silence.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
don't make it be about the technique of quieting down. Yeah. See, that just is telling you that you're just doing too much thinking in general.
Good.
Okay. So as you quiet down in your own mind, the quieting comes from insight.
Mhm.
All of a sudden you're more secure. So you do less thinking.
Mhm.
All of a sudden you see that your thinking is just like, it's like for me, I had a huge shift a few weeks ago when I realized that we think that our intellect has intelligence, but it really doesn't. So it's like we're all going to Siri to ask her to tell us how to do our life. And what's in Siri is just whatever you programmed in there. So if you think you're a worthless piece of crap, that's what comes out. If you think that, you like, chicken and turkey, then that's what comes out. It's just whatever you programmed in, but there's no intelligence there. Intelligence comes from the feeling. And that's what allows us to see whether the thought we're having is worth like giving it any attention. That's why we're not stuck with that thinking. But when you don't know that, it seems like your intelligence is that your intellect has intelligence. Like those thoughts look real. They look like they're true. They look like they're coming from God, if you will, sometimes. But the ability that we have to look at the thoughts we create and decide which to go with and which to leave, that's intelligence. It's like when I get on Siri, I just did it yesterday. I Googled something and she brought up something totally different. And my intelligence was able to look at that and say, oh, no, that's not the right answer. I have to go back and try it again. Right. And so that's kind of what we have to do with our intellect. It throws out thoughts, but we have to be able to say like, oh, no, that's not a very good thought. Let it go. I don't even remember what it was that Siri thought wrong about. Like, it doesn't matter to me, but what happens is we think our thoughts matter. Like there's something there that we should be paying attention to. There's something there that we should give credibility to. And that's why we have a hard time letting go, because we go back to it like, oh, it's like your best friend, like, tell me what to do. And it's like, okay. And it does. And it tells you stuff. But whether that's worthwhile or not, that's another question.
I love that. I had this thing come up to me that says, I really, it's very surprising how little thinking I need to get by.
Mm.
The more and more I come to the principles, it's almost like I see that there is not really a need for a lot of the stuff that just happened. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And so each time you get an insight into how irrelevant your thinking is, your mind quiets. When it looks relevant to you, when it looks like there's some intelligence there that will help you to not be insecure, we can't let go of it. So people get caught up in their thinking all the time, trying to find the right answer, trying to figure things out, trying to like understand the future or manage the future. But that's because it looks like it has intelligence. That's the big trick, isn't it? It's like it's just thought. It's just information. Might be right, might not be right.
That was such a great question, Anna. And Chris, the answer is so perfect. There's so many people in mystery school that have asked, how do I know when I'm in wisdom and when I'm in my intellect and my personal thinking? And your answer to Anna's question just really hit the mark about that. It's such a common question for people. It's a feeling.
Well, people are still trying to figure it out. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah. That they're still going to, like, there's got to be an answer. It seems like when I look for something and it's in my junk drawer, I'll go to that junk drawer and I look, it's not there. And then I go away and I come back and I go, no, it's got to be there. I go back and I'll look again. And to me, that's kind of what memory is the junk drawer.
Yeah. Well, we have time for maybe one more question. Anybody have one? Yeah, we got 2 minutes to the hour. Wow. Well, I'll make a little commercial then. I'm waiting, looking for any hands that are raised. You know, this is one of the reasons, like Chris mentioned, that nobody knows more than anybody else because it's not an intellectual thing. So that's why we do mystery schools. Some of the people who are on here who have participated in mystery school, and I love it because we're all dipping into the same well of understanding. And, you know, it's basically a book club for Sid's materials. So get in touch if, you know, it'd be great for any marriage and family therapy interns who, because I find that my clients don't have to see me very long. When they're reading and listening to Sid, it really cuts down on the length of time. And then I get to see more people and share this with more people. So anyway, this has been so wonderful, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know.
Oh, thanks for having me.
He's good.
Great to see you as always, and great to see the great work you're doing by sharing this. I mean, I think that's kind of what we have to do, is leave a legacy so that people understand the importance of this. And let me give you another little commercial here. I think it's the first Sunday in December, 3PGC is going to air a brand new video that has never been seen by anybody of Sydney Banks. And it is actually, he's talking to practitioners. So it's going to be especially good for people that are coaches or sharing it in some way. But I just listened to it yesterday. It's really great. It's from West Virginia.
Oh, wonderful.
In fact, Lori is in it. That you get a close-up of Lori in the video of you 20 years ago.
Well, nobody else will recognize me, right? But you.
Oh, no, you can recognize you. You look gorgeous as always, but yeah, it's a really nice picture of you. It's very nice.
Oh, that's so funny. You know, I organized I checked with 3PGC with Bonnie that I could organize a watch party for the first one that came out of the curated video. It was wonderful to have other people watching at the same time.
Great. Well, you can do another one. We're going to have one a month. Shane said we're going to have about 8 more of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And in total, I know it's like Christmas every time it comes out, right? Yeah.
It'll be our holiday present to everybody.
Isn't it amazing? I just want to say one more thing, that we're living in an age when we can get together online like this and get together online watching Sid too. Like, we don't have to drive, never mind drive. All the times we flew, right? Like, I would fly from Connecticut to Hawaii to hear Sid speak. Yes, I would tack on a vacation after that, but you know, he was like, wherever he was talking, that's where I would go on vacation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're so lucky. I mean, we're just really
so lucky. Yeah, I can't believe it. Like Tom said, that you hit the jackpot. Yeah, it's the lottery of life.
Thank you all again.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Thank you for having me. Aloha.
Thanks, Lori.
Aloha. Aloha. Aloha.